So are you tired of the classic A Christmas Story and wanting something new and hopefully better? Well, get your zappers and your power gloves ready because we might have a contender here. 8-Bit Christmas is brought to us by director Michael Dowse and stars Neil Patrick Harris, Winslow Fegley, and Steve Zahn. In 1980 Chicago, a 10-year-old sets out on a quest to get the Christmas gift of his generation, the Nintendo Entertainment System. So this movie kind of spoke to me because I remember when the NES came out and all these kids at school had it and I didn't. I had an Atari 2600 that I got at a yard sale. So I get where this kid was coming from because I was around that age as well and my family didn't have a whole lot of money and it was like the only thing on my radar during that period of time. This movie shares a lot of similarities with the classic A Christmas Story. However, I will say that it is also its own thing. It would have been really easy and I'm sure really tempting for them to just pretty much copy that formula to an 80s setting. But that's not what they did. They actually tell their own story, though it is somewhat in the same vein as A Christmas Story. Kind of a Christmas story for the 80s generation. And for the most part, it does work. This is a really enjoyable family holiday film. Much like A Christmas Story, this isn't just about that one thing that the kid wants to get. It's about his life during this period of time. Our Ralphie for this film would be Jake, played by Winslow Fegley. We get to know him, his mom and dad, and his younger sister. And they all have their quirks, but much like the classic A Christmas Story, the standout here would be the dad, played by Steve Zahn. While the movie does feature his entire family, and we get a good amount of time with each of them, it's his dad that gets the most amount of time out of all of his family. This is very much about a son and his dad and their differences and how hopefully they can come together. Now we also get all of Jake's eccentric friends and they were all a pretty good time as well. This is where the movie does have a lot more similarities with A Christmas Story than any other area. We've got the bully who's always picking on all the kids that eventually we know that Jake is going to have to stand up to. The younger sibling that has to tag along with him when he goes places, though this time around his younger sister can really hold her own. And his best friends that go on these crazy adventures with him. And all these characters have their own personalities and were a good time to watch. The movie takes place in the 80s, so there is of course some throwbacks to that time period, some nostalgia hooks, but it doesn't ever really rely on that stuff. We've gotten a lot of movies recently that are set in the 80s that really rely on that nostalgia to sell what's going on. This movie does a better job at that. Yeah, sure, we get plenty of those nostalgia moments. Lots of things you'll see in this movie that if you grew up in the 80s, you're gonna be like, oh fuck yeah, I remember that. But it doesn't ever rely on it. Nor does it just sit there and like shove the fact that it's set in the 80s down your throat the entire time. The movie does a good job of balancing that whole 80s nostalgia with the actual family dynamic and friends and the actual story of what's going on here. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the review, this movie is just destined to be compared to A Christmas Story, and there are definitely similarities here. But I do think that the movie differentiates itself just enough to be its own thing, and it does a really good job. We've gotten a lot of movies over the years that try and take on that A Christmas Story mantle, and this one honestly probably comes closer than any of the others. It doesn't dethrone the king, I will say that much, but I do think that it will have a place right there after you finish watching A Christmas Story. You could go right into this movie. This was a really enjoyable family holiday flick. And if you grew up in the 80s or anywhere near that time period and have any memories of things like the Nintendo and wanting that stuff and just this time period in general, I think that just adds to it all the more. All the performances here are really solid. Neil Patrick Harris and Steve Zahn would be the standouts, but that's not to say that everybody else here doesn't do a great job. I really enjoyed the cast. It seems like everybody that was making this movie really wanted to be here making this movie and they were having a great time doing it. One of the things that really did set this movie apart from other Christmas films like say A Christmas Story would be its ending. I really liked the way this movie ended. It ended in a way that I just didn't see coming, and the message and everything involved in that ending I thought was just really good. I want to see more unconventional endings like this in these types of films. This was a great ending and it will be very affecting after you finish watching the movie. Overall, I thought the story here was really entertaining and heartwarming. Guys, 8-Bit Christmas was a great holiday film that I think is going to stand the test of time. It's got a fun, relatable story with some really entertaining characters, and while it might not quite dethrone the king of all Christmas movies, A Christmas Story, it does a solid job and earns it a spot up there near the top. And in my opinion, 8-Bit Christmas is absolutely worth a buy.
Do it! Do it!
Show me the money!
Do it!
You motherfucker!
So,
Show me the money!
do it!
This was just a really earnest, honest, good-feeling holiday film. We don't get that often anymore. A lot of these types of movies come across as really fake. This one just seemed really fun and honest, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a really fun holiday flick for the night, then check out 8-Bit Christmas, and I think you're gonna have a really great time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of 8-Bit Christmas. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys, and possibly join my top tier and become a bad motherfucker like my man Greg C and Dragon Con. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Chicago!
Video games have been doing all kinds of strange things to children.
This is how you do something like A Christmas Story justice. You don't try and remake it. That's like blasphemy. No, you make a movie that is its own movie, but in a similar vein. Something that can sit up there with A Christmas Story. I was really happy to see that, and more so, I'm happy that they still haven't remade A Christmas Story. I think they did a TV movie once, but they haven't actually gone and remade that movie in like movie form. I feel like one day it is coming, and that will be a very sad day in cinema. Just stop. Don't do it. Not everything has to be remade. Do like this movie did. Go and make your own thing. Stop living off of somebody else's coattail. Man, I didn't know I felt so strongly about A Christmas Story. It's a classic!